Hello, ladies. I hope you are well. Happy Thursday. I am jumping on today to talk about the ketogenic diet. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about sort of like more recent research on the ketogenic diet and its impact on body composition in women specifically. So there's not a whole lot of research. Most research into like nutrition and exercise is done on men. So anytime it's done on women, I always get a little bit excited because we are not tiny men. And so it's nice to see, like we're very different than men. We have a very different hormonal profile. So it's always good to see what the research is showing as to the impact of various fat loss and fitness strategies on women specifically. So that was one of the reasons that this research caught my eye. And so we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research and the findings. And then towards the end of the conversation, I'm also going to talk a little bit about what this means to you. So especially if you are currently doing a ketogenic diet, or maybe you're considering a ketogenic diet because it's the new year and you want to make some changes, or maybe you just got started because that was your New Year's resolution. So either way, that is what we're going to be diving into today. And I'm just pulling up my phone so that I can see anyone who comments or has any questions as I go through this. But before we get started here, if you do not know me, if you are new to this group, my name is Haley Wilson. I am the founder of this group. I'm also the founder of Project Menopause, and I specifically help women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s that are struggling with stubborn weight loss. And I do that without extremes. So no crazy caloric restriction, no extreme diets where you can't eat your favorite foods ever again, no, intensive cardio where you've got to be working out 5 days a week for 2 hours. I don't do any of that. I really just teach women how their body is changing, how their hormones are changing, how their metabolism is changing, so that they can address those changes with their nutrition and with their lifestyle habits so that they can take control over their body again. Now, obviously, in this little live video, I'm going to give you like some little nuggets, but if you feel like you need some help to really achieve your goals in 2024, just send me a DM and we can have a quick chat about whether or not I can help. Okay, so before we get going, I see a couple of you are joining me live. I see Marcia, I see Kristen so far. I know most of you are catching this on replay, but what I want you to do right now is if you are watching live, put a live in the comments. If you are watching on a replay, put a replay in the comments. So live if you're live, replay if you're watching the replay. And if you can just smash either the heart button or the like button right now, what that does is it helps it tells Facebook to send this training or to show this training to more women inside this community. And that's what this community is about. It's about helping women really create a sustainable and healthy approach to their weight management. So if you could, again, either smash the heart button or smash the like button so that I can get this out to more women, that tells Facebook that this is a training that you want to see. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so again, before I kind of jump into the actual research, I just want to quickly define what keto is in case some of you are, you've heard the term, but you don't exactly know what it is. So keto essentially is it's a very low carb, high fat, moderate protein diet. And what that usually looks like, because there's a ton of different variations on keto, but typically speaking, what that's going to look like is that about 5% of your calories will be coming from carbohydrates. Usually 15 to 20% of your calories are coming from protein, and the rest of those calories, so upwards of 80%, depending on the type of keto that you're doing, are coming from fat, okay? Again, there's so many different variations on keto, but that's sort of like what you would call like sort of like classic keto, okay? Now, this research is interesting because a lot of the studies that are done on ketogenic diets are done on people that either have a lot of weight to lose or they are metabolically unhealthy. So maybe they have like type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance. But this particular study was done on women that were already in pretty good shape, right? That didn't have that much weight to lose and that were already quite fit. So these are women who already exercised, okay? And what they were looking into, again, is body composition change. So body composition change is a little bit different than just what we call weight loss. And this is something really important for everyone to understand and a term that I really want you to try and embrace, because when we're talking about weight loss, we're talking about just losing weight on the scale. We want to see the number on the scale drop. But where is that weight loss coming from? Is it coming from fat? Is it coming from muscle? Is it coming from bone density? Is it coming from water retention? When we use the term weight loss, it's just the number on the scale. Body composition change is where you are transforming the body. And typically speaking, it is getting rid of fat and replacing that fat with muscle, or at least maintaining that muscle so that you get that toned physique that most women are after. Okay, does that make sense? So that's what this research was about. It wanted to look at, does keto have a positive impact on body composition change? Okay, before I keep going, I see some of you are hopping on, so hello. Again, live if you're watching live, replay if you're watching the replay. I would like to know quickly in the chat, if you've ever tried keto, if you're thinking of keto, if you've been researching keto, just put a me in the comments so that I know sort of where you're at. Definitely yesterday when I posted about today's live, there were a lot of comments. So clearly this is still an approach to fat loss that is very, very popular. And I was surprised to see how many comments I got. So that I thought that was really interesting. So just put a me in the comments if you've done keto or you're thinking of keto or whatever it may be. Okay. All right. So this type of research has been done before on men. And when they studied it on men, what they found was that keto was better for fat loss. However, a diet that was higher in carbohydrates was better for muscle mass, okay? And this is really important to understand, and we're going to dig into this a little bit more, but I just want you to understand that in men, what they found is that the ketogenic diet was better for fat loss, and they were comparing, so what they were comparing with these men is that they had these men eating the same amount of protein, but one group was having 5% carbs, tons of fat. The other one was doing a high carb, low fat approach. And what they found was that the men that were, again, eating the same amount of protein, because protein is the first macronutrient that you should be prioritizing, but the men that were eating more fat and less carbs had a better, they saw more fat loss, right? So they lost fat, body fat. However, it did have an impact on their muscle mass. Okay, and we're going to talk more about this for women as well and help you understand why this is something that you need to take into consideration if you are going to start a ketogenic diet, or if you're already doing a ketogenic diet and you want the best results possible. Okay, all right, so until recently, this sort of topic of body composition change in women on a ketogenic diet had not been studied. But then this research came out. So I want to tell you a little about the study itself. I've got some notes here that I'm looking at, just so that you know, like, what were these women doing? And as I go through this, I'll kind of point out a couple of things that you need to understand. Okay, so number one, there were 21, hi Caroline, there were 21 women in the study. So it is a relatively small study. Some studies out there, you know, they're looking at 20,000 people, whatever it may be. So this is a relatively small study. And the women were between the ages of 18 and 35. So these women were not in menopause or perimenopause or in midlife. They were not in the menopause transition, 18 to 35. And again, like I said at the beginning, these women were already somewhat fit. Okay, so they had 2 years of resistance training, exercise, regular exercise under their belt. Okay. The other thing about this study that I want you to understand is that the researchers did not put them in a caloric deficit. Okay. So they were not asked to, you know, go on a 1,200 calorie keto diet versus a 1,200 calorie high carb diet. They were asked to eat at maintenance, because again, what they wanted to compare is, if you just make that shift to keto, does your body suddenly magically start burning fat? Okay. So the program or the research went on for 8 weeks, and half of the group, the keto group, they were eating between 30 and 40 grams of carbohydrates, which is pretty typical because for the most part, women need 50 grams of carbs or less to get into ketosis, which is the whole goal of being on a ketogenic diet. Now, these women were also eating 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. This is a little bit more than a standard ketogenic diet, okay? And so they were actually getting this approach was more of a high protein keto, but it can teach us a lot about what's happening here. The other half of the women, they ate like a higher carbohydrate approach. So they were eating 300 grams of carbs per day was their goal. So 30 to 40, 300 grams, right? That's a huge difference. The protein was exactly the same. The calories were exactly the same. So the only thing that changed is that in the keto group, 30 to 40 grams of carbs and a ton of fat. And in the high carb group, 300 grams of carbohydrates and obviously very low fat, in order to, again, be at the right, like from a caloric perspective, be in the right place. Okay. These women were, they had to eat 3 to 6 meals a day, whatever they wanted. They had to track everything they were doing in MyFitnessPal, and they all did the exact same exercise program, which was a resistance training program, which means they were picking up weights. They were doing like lunges and squats and chest press and shoulder press and rows and anything that really is there to stimulate the building of muscle. Okay. So what the researchers analyzed, or what they were looking at, is obviously they were looking once again at body composition. So the impact of the 2 separate diets on body fat and lean mass. And lean mass is your muscle, but also your bone and your organs, like anything that's not body fat, right? So body fat, lean mass, they were looking at both of those. And then they were also looking at their food journals, because they wanted to know, well, number one, you know, are these women actually adhering to the guidelines that we're giving them? Because this is one of the major issues with any kind of research into nutrition. If the participants don't adhere to what you are asking them to do, then the results, they're not really valid, right? And so this is an interesting part here, and this is something that I want you to listen to. So when they looked at their food journals, there was a couple of things that sort of jumped out to me. Number one, so the women, so again, they were instructed to eat at maintenance at about the same 100 amount of calories. The women who were following the ketogenic approach were eating on average 1,700 calories a day. And the women in the high carb group were eating on average 1,980 calories a day. So that's about a 250 calorie difference. And it's not because the women on keto were told to do that. It's just because that's what they naturally did. Now, that alone shows something that I think is one of the pros of the ketogenic diet, which is that it is a natural appetite suppressant, right? So the moment that you play with your macros. So I'm a macro coach. I really like teaching my clients about macros. And this is one of the beautiful things about macros is that a calorie is not just a calorie. The calories that you get from protein, the calories you get from fat, the calories you get from carbs, they have different impacts inside your body when you digest them. And one of the big things that you can control when you start playing around with macros is your appetite. And keto is well known as a diet that A, reduces appetite, B, reduces cravings, C, improves energy, okay? There are some cons to keto, and we're going to talk about those as well. But just so you understand that these women were just naturally eating less calories because they were following this ketogenic diet, okay? The other thing to know is that from the food journals, what they noticed is that the women were eating, the women that were doing keto were actually eating way more protein than the women doing the high carb. Even though they were asked to do the same thing, they were eating more. Okay, so let's jump into the results because I'm sure you're interested to know this. Okay, so as I said at the very beginning of this, when they did this study on men, what they noticed is that the ketogenic diet caused significantly more body fat loss, but limited the amount of muscle building. Okay, so the building of muscle. And again, I'm going to explain why this is important, especially if you are over the age of 40, 50, 60, okay? Why this is really important for you. So did the women have the same results? Yes, they did. Okay, so from this research, the ketogenic group lost more body fat. Okay, the high carb group gained about 0.5 pounds of body fat. So the keto group, I can't remember how much they lost, but they lost body fat, whereas the high carb group gained about 0.5 pounds of body fat in 8 weeks. However, the keto group lost muscle, okay? And I'm going to explain why this is important. So like I said, when we're looking at these results, when you're looking at any research out there, especially if you're looking like in a newspaper or a magazine and, you know, they're using clickbait, like the ketogenic diet burns more fat or whatever it may be, you have to really start to think and analyze the results of the research. And this can be a little bit hard if you're not used to doing that, but when you're looking at these results and you're like, okay, the keto group, they lost more body fat, the keto works, like I should jump on keto, I'm going to go buy a book tomorrow, I'm starting tomorrow, whatever it may be. You have to analyze all the different elements of a research and try and figure out, well, okay, what is going on here? Is this actually what's going on? So the big question here is, did the ketogenic group lose body fat because of keto? Or did they lose body fat because they were eating less calories? Okay, so that's the number one thing that I want you to think about. So they were eating 14% fewer calories than the high carb group. So was it the fact that they were doing keto that made them burn the fat, or was it just the fact that they were able to naturally be in a caloric deficit? Either way, it doesn't mean that it's bad to be keto, but I want you to understand that we don't actually know if it was the macronutrient ratio of 5% carbs, 80% fat, or if it was the 250 calorie deficit that caused the loss of body fat. And the reason I say that is because I want women to understand that I personally don't think that you need to be in ketosis in order to burn body fat. I think you need to be in a caloric deficit. Now, for some women, the ketogenic diet will make that easier, but I have plenty of clients in my program that are not in ketosis and they are burning body fat. So I want to make sure you understand that, because when we're talking about the pros and cons of keto, the pro, appetite suppressant, helps with cravings. The con, maybe not sustainable long-term, because it's hard. It's hard to give up sweet potatoes, fruit, pasta, bread, all the things, right? It's hard to do that long-term. And so what I've seen, I used to be a keto coach, by the way, in case you're wondering. I have nothing against keto, but that was the main thing that I saw, is that, and even in myself, is that keto is hard to sustain long-term. And once you reintroduce the carbs, it's kind of really hard to cut them back again. Okay, so that's one thing I want to point out. The second thing I want to point out is going back to that muscle mass loss, okay? So the high carb group, they gained 1.5 pounds of muscle in 8 weeks. That's a lot. It is really hard to build muscle, and there is a lot of evidence to suggest from the bodybuilding world that a higher carb approach is really, really good, because insulin stimulates growth. Insulin stimulates the building of muscle. Okay, so the women in the high carb group gained 1.5 pounds of muscle. The women in the keto group lost 1.5 pounds of muscle. Okay, so we have to really think about that, because when you are on a diet, and some of you have heard me talk about this before, some of you are new to the group and you may have not heard me talk about this, but when you are dieting to lose weight or lose body fat and change your body composition, one of the main priorities or one of the main goals of your fat loss phase should also be to protect your muscle mass. Why? Because muscle is more metabolically active than fat. And the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn at rest. And muscle also happens to be the key to being insulin sensitive, to being able to eat the carbs and not gain weight. So we want muscle, especially in midlife, because what happens in midlife, and this starts around the age of 35, 40, and really ramps up around menopause, is we start to lose muscle because of sarcopenia, or age-related muscle mass loss. And so as we are approaching menopause, one of our top fitness goals should be to protect or build muscle mass at all cost. And that is something that we really need to consider if we're going to try a ketogenic approach. And in a second, I'm going to give you some suggestions or my feedback on, if you are going to do keto, this is how I would do it to mitigate against the loss of muscle mass. Now, again, because we have to be I try to be as objective as possible when I'm looking at these studies. Did these women lose 1.5 pounds of muscle because of keto? Or did they lose it because they were in a caloric deficit? Because the moment you are in a caloric deficit, you will almost inevitably lose a little bit of muscle. Now, 1.5 in 8 weeks, it's pretty significant, especially if you're going to be on keto for like a year or so. But we don't really know. We don't really know if they lost the weight because of keto or, once again, because of the caloric deficit. Okay, so this study, oh, here's my cat coming to say hi. I'm just going to kick him off the table here. So just so that you understand here as we're doing this. However, I do think that some of it is probably due to the ketogenic diet, because there has certainly been research in the past that shows that ketogenic diets have what's called an anti-anabolic effect, which means that it suppresses something called muscle protein synthesis, which is the key to building, maintaining muscle. Okay. So even when I was a keto coach, way back when, I would encourage my clients to cycle in carbohydrates at least once a week. I think going like full keto for a short period of time is fine, but beyond 4 to 5 weeks, I got my clients to cycle carbs in. Okay. And even in my more recent programs where we weren't even really in ketosis, we were probably on the edge of ketosis. Carb cycling has always been one of my main strategies to ensure that my clients are not losing muscle mass as they are losing weight. I want them losing quality weight. I want them losing body fat. I want them to see body composition change. So it's really important if you're considering keto to understand that while it might really help with body fat, it may not help with muscle mass. And what this means to you is that if you do lose muscle mass as you are dieting, it can make it harder to maintain the gains that you've gotten from the diet after, because it slows down your metabolism. So what you may potentially find is that keto works, but when you get off keto, because you have now a slower metabolic rate, because you have less muscle, and potentially you ate less because your appetite was suppressed, you might start to see that weight like come back on, and maybe more so. So they're just things to consider, okay? All right, so again, let's talk about a couple of things that I want you to take into consideration, especially it's the new year, you're trying to decide what kind of approach am I going to take. So again, if your goal is body composition change, right? And you specifically, like you're starting to notice that you're flabbier, you've got less muscle, your butt's a little like saggy or whatever it may be. You know what that means, right? Like even I'm noticing it. It's like, okay, I've got less muscle than I did in my 30s or whatever it may be. Then, and your priority is body composition change in the sense of you want to lose body fat so that you can see that toned muscle look. Keto might not be the best choice for you. If you are a woman who has, your doctor is like, you seriously need to lose 60 to 80 pounds as soon as possible because it is going to impact your health, keto might be the right way to go, because it is going to potentially help you with your appetite, your cravings, and potentially get you more fat loss than another program. So again, there is no cookie cutter diet. There is no one way that's going to work for every single woman out there. You kind of have to weigh the pros and the cons and decide what's going to be the right fit for you. Now, that being said, there is a right way and a wrong way to do keto. And this is something that I've been preaching from the very beginning when I was a keto coach. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that are really, really important. Number one, you do not want to be in a crazy deficit. Do not go on a ketogenic diet, eat 1,200 calories a day, and also fast for, 16 to 20 hours a day and expect permanent results. Because if you do that, if you follow a keto diet and you do 1,200 calories and you start doing intermittent fasting every single day, I can almost guarantee that at the end, you will gain the weight back and then some, because you will have potentially slowed down your metabolism. Maybe not every woman, but it is definitely something that I see all the time. The second thing that I want you to understand is that within the context of keto, with the potential that because you have less carbs and less insulin and less muscle protein synthesis, there is the potential that you are going to experience more muscle loss, especially as a woman in midlife that is also potentially experiencing sarcopenia. You must be doing resistance training if you go on a keto diet, okay? You don't want to just be sedentary and go on a keto diet. You want to, if it is permitted, obviously you have to talk to your doctor, but ideally you are strength training, because there's two things that help with sarcopenia. strength training, eating more protein. Okay, so if you're going to go keto, mitigate the loss of muscle mass by adding in strength training 3 to 4 times a week. Number 2, I do not recommend the standard ketogenic diet of 15 to 20% of your calories from protein. I would much prefer that you are getting at a very minimum 30% of your calories from protein. And in fact, I wouldn't even worry about percentages. I would go with figuring out, I don't know, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, maybe even 1 gram per pound of body weight. But protein, again, is going to be the number one macro that you need to prioritize, that my clients prioritize. It is the first thing I teach my clients. I repeat it all the time with them. This is going to help you, especially if you're in a caloric deficit, especially if you're on a ketogenic diet. You've got to prioritize that protein. So the diets that are out there where these women are on like 15% of their calories from protein, I think it's going to impact that muscle mass. And if you've read that it does not, I would say, where are they getting that information from? Because a lot of the research done on keto, by the way, if you've been studying it, there's a book on low carb athletes. So number 1, it was on athletes. Number 2, it was all on men. They're different from us. But has there been research on muscle mass loss in women in their 50s on a ketogenic diet? No. So we don't actually know. We have to use our smarts to figure out what is the best, most effective way to do it for us as women in midlife within the context of what is happening to our hormones and happening to our metabolism. Okay. So I would say more, minimum 100 grams per day is probably what I would recommend. And then, of course, because of some of the other things that are happening during this phase of our life, another big thing that's happening is we are much more inflamed than we ever were before, which means that we need to have an anti-inflammatory approach to our diet. So with a keto approach, if you are doing the pepperoni sticks and the bacon every day and the cheese and the cheesy, creamy, bacony casseroles and the keto fast foods, you're probably not aiding in that inflammatory, that systemic inflammation that goes up, especially as estrogen goes down. So again, there's not one way of doing keto. There's all kinds of ways, and you kind of need to figure out within the context of midlife and menopause, what is the best way to go about it if that is what you decide to do. Okay. So I hope that was helpful for you in just helping you understand a little bit more about the relationship between keto, women, fat loss, muscle mass, what's happening in midlife. Of course, in these little lives, I'm really just, I'm touching like the tip of the iceberg of what I can teach you. If you feel like you want to have a little bit more help with your nutrition, if you have a fat loss goal, if you'd like to get the additional support, the additional accountability, I do have a program where I go very in depth into all things nutrition specific to women in midlife going through menopause. And you can send me a DM and we can set up a time to connect and see if it would be a good fit for you. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Donna, for commenting. Thank you, Caroline, for commenting. If you guys found that interesting, again, smash the heart button, smash the like, because we can get this out to more women in the community so that they have a better understanding, because it's so confusing out there. There's so much information, and it's really hard to find information that is specific to our age group, that is specific to just being a woman. And that's what this group is about, is to help educate you about your body and how it's changing and your hormones and what should you be doing. So thank you for watching. I don't know what the topic is going to be next week. So if you guys have something that you want to learn about, let me know, put it in the comments, just be like, ask me a question. I can make the next live all about that. Otherwise, I will come up with my own topic. Have a great day, ladies. See you soon. Happy New Year.